This is the bluefin tuna. At the beginning of last century, people in Japan hated the bluefin tuna. Today, tuna is the most common fish used in sushi. It is found in both high-class Michelin-starred sushi restaurants in Tokyo and the takeout fridges in Houston Hall. It is the standard to which all of the sushi is measured. It's hard to imagine, but as recently as the 1940s, tuna was disdained all over Japan. Although it is now ubiquitous, tuna did not join forces with sushi until relatively recently. Sushi was originally invented in around the 8th century as a form of fermented fish and rice stored in a jar for preservation. The fish slowly rotted as it was stored for months, lending it the name zushi, originating from the word supai, meaning sour. People began eating this decayed fish sooner and sooner in the fermentation process, eventually eating it immediately after being caught, before fermentation, giving us the sushi we know today. However, the sushi fish preferred by diners through the 16, 17, 18, and much of the 1900s was referred to as white fish. These fishes had distinctive white flesh and a clean, fresh taste. Tuna, along with salmon, was red fish, referring to the darker flesh color, indicating the presence of fatty deposits in blood. Tuna was called gizakana, or inferior fish, only fit for the poorest workers, or more often, for cat food. But by the end of World War II, the country of Japan had been ravaged by war. The country needed to rebuild its economy as well as its food industry. The nation was primed for a shift in tastes and eating habits. By the 1980s, tuna was widespread. So during these reconstructive years of the 1950s through the 70s, tuna went from cat food to delicacy. This shift was driven by three main factors. The first factor leading to tuna's rise is that globalization led to a taste for fattier cuts of meat. After World War II, trade with the West, and America specifically, rose rapidly. The U.S. had troops stationed all over Japan to aid with reconstruction, and the cultures began to meld. Increased adoption of American culture obviously involved adoption of some of their eating habits. Hamburgers, fatty steaks, and the like made their way into the Japanese diet.
食べ比べるとやっぱり脂のある方が美味しく感じるからそれでトロトロと言うんだと思いますけど。それによって味が全く違ってくるから味見をするんであれば赤身と中トロが
This is Jiro Ono, widely considered to be the finest sushi chef in the world and a definitive member of the old school. He points out that even after the adoption of tuna into the Japanese diet, the trend continues towards fattier cuts. There are three main cuts of tuna: akame, chutoro, and otoro, and the prices increase as the cuts of tuna get fattier. All three of these cuts are fattier than the more old-school types of sushi fish like mackerel, eel, and clam. The second factor leading to the adoption of tuna is improved refrigeration techniques. The bluefin tuna is a massive fish, averaging from 225 to 551 pounds. Because of its massive size, the selling process takes some time. Multiple buyers split up meat from the same fish, and a single fish will change hands several times from wholesaler to fishmonger to restaurant owner. Bluefin tuna are also scattered across the globe rather evenly, and because of their large size and position at the top of the food chain, they are comparatively scarce compared to other smaller species. But beginning in 1965, Japanese longline fishing boats began using large industrial freezers located directly on the ship. This technology allowed fish to be transported to Japan from anywhere on the globe. The final factor was pressure from Japanese shipping companies. In the late 60s and 70s, Japanese exports of electronics had reached a peak. Japan Airlines was one of the top shipping companies, bringing televisions, semiconductors, and other electrical equipment to the port of New York. They made an easy profit, but were wasting money by flying empty planes back to Japan. During this period, the freezer technology mentioned above was just starting to take off, and tuna was just starting to be accepted as a sushi fish. Japan Airlines capitalized on this and began flying cheap tuna from Canadian fisheries out of ports in North America. They gambled on it, absolutely flooding the Japanese market with bluefin tuna. It paid off. In the summer of 1974, 9/10 of Japan Airlines' outbound cargo from Canada was tuna, and people were buying. Over the next 20 years, the average price paid to Atlantic tuna fishermen rose by 10,000%. So tuna is now considered the most important fish for Japanese cuisine. It's a national obsession. It's the epitome of elegance, but it is also the most commonly ordered sushi in Japan. You can get it off of conveyor belts and in takeout boxes. Perhaps tuna's most defining characteristic as a Japanese commodity is its ubiquity. Through the end of the 20th century, sushi exploded in popularity across the world. America especially has developed a massive appetite for sushi and began taking part in the tuna trade. By 1970, Japan became a kind of a clearinghouse for the global tuna industry, with global imports of sushi overtaking domestic production. Tokyo's Tsukiji fish market became the largest in the world. So here's Japan's current problem. Japan as a country has this deep connection to tuna both economically and symbolically, and they eat a ton of it. The rest of the world does not have this deep connection, but they eat a ton of it too. Both the global obsession and the Japanese tuna culture are unsustainable. Bluefin tuna numbers have dropped by 96% in the last century. This is like if the US beef industry were completely unsustainable and we were reaching a breaking point. We would have to ask what's more important to us, maintaining the tradition of the great American hamburger and steak, or maintaining our economic place in the global beef trade. It's a tough situation. The commoditization of tuna has placed Japan at a difficult crossroads between culture, economics, and environmental responsibility. In the next decade or so, we'll see a significant shift in how Japan deals with this quickly depleting resource.